Hi everybody, Stu Sefcik from Should Have Been Engineering, and I thought today that we'd show everybody how to do a test for a bent connecting rod from a hydrolock vent. Now if you've seen my other videos, you know that I feel that the two things that kill Kawasaki Concours are crashes and hydrolocks. And of course the hydrolock is whenever the cylinder fills up with gasoline because of a petcock or carburetor failure. And then when you try to start it, you can't compress the liquid and it bends the connecting rod. So I thought we'd take some time to kind of show you what exactly is happening, how to make a little tool to be able to check it on your bike and to be able to determine if you've got a good engine or if you have an engine that's been compromised. Here's a connecting rod I removed out of a Concours that was bent from a hydrolock. As you can see, right through the shaft in here, obviously bent. You can compare it against the straight edge. Okay, here's a simple tool that I made. It's kind of a crude depth gauge, but it'll work. I just took a long screwdriver, thin. I cut a couple pieces of vacuum hose. Just use regular vacuum hose and cut little pieces off with the scissor. And I used the fender washer on here. Now the idea is that we're going to be able to slide those up and locate the fender washer at a given depth and then be able to compare it against the other piston in the engine. Okay, here's a Concours crankshaft and I'll show you what it is that we're going to be comparing. If you are an engine guy, you'll understand this. But the crank pins for cylinder 1 and cylinder 4 are on the same timing. They're both up together. And then the crank pins for 2 and 3 are on the same timing. So they both reach top dead center together. So when we go and we do our checking of piston heights, we're going to be doing that pair by pair. In other words, we'll be comparing cylinder 2 and cylinder 3 against each other, and cylinder 1 and cylinder 4 against each other. And when we compare the heights of the pistons, if there's a bent connecting rod, that piston is going to be lower in the bore than its mate on the other side of the engine. Alright, this engine is from a 2005 Concours. It only has 8,000 miles on it. Unfortunately, the previous owner had some hydrolock issues. He had a failing petcock and he had a carburetor issue he didn't bother to deal with. And ultimately, this engine's destroyed internally. It has 2 bent connecting rods. Now, I'm going to show you what those bent connecting rods would look like on the rod test gauge. First, we're going to set the depth gauge on piston number 1. So I'm going to come up here against the side wall and slide my gauge down. The rubber makes it a little hard to slide, but it'll hold the washer in position. As you can see, I've just pulled the washer down against the deck. Now I'm going to move this over to cylinder number 4. Put it down on the piston. Well, my screwdriver's down on the piston and you can see that the washer is probably 1/10 of an inch off of the deck. That tells you that piston number 1 is bent about 1/10 of an inch. This piston is higher. This is the connecting rod at its proper length. Piston number 1 being low tells you that that one is bent. Okay, now this is also going to be easy to see, the comparison between cylinder 2 and cylinder 3. Obviously, the cylinder number 3 piston is further down in the bore. If you look at the end of my screwdriver, you can see it's down about 1/8 of an inch into the bore. You come over here onto cylinder number 2, and you can see that I'm only down maybe 1 millimeter or so into the bore. So I'd venture to say that cylinder number 3, the connecting rod is bent and the piston's down probably 80 thousandths. Well, we're going to do a hydrolock rod test on this bike today. I've already taken off the tank, taken off the coils, and taken all the spark plugs out in preparation for the test. Obviously, you have to have that stuff out of the way so you can work your gauge down in there. Well, I was trying to bring the piston up a little bit higher in the bore so I could use my gauge and show you all. And I got really surprised when I touched the starter and a big load of gasoline blew up out of cylinder number 4. So I'm going to have the camera come on around over here, and I'm going to touch the starter again and see if I can show you what that's like. Okay, I'm going to hit the starter button just to go ahead and kind of clear that cylinder a little bit. Believe me, you never want to do this with your coils still intact, because this was all raw gasoline that came out of here. Let's see what we get. Wow, look at that. Looks to me like cylinder number 2 is full of gas too. Wow, I'm covered. Okay, so now you can see how hydrolocks happen. This is for real. I got to clean up my mess and we'll get back to the hydrolock rod test. Okay, you know, I want you to know that what you just saw was in real time, just like what I saw it. I have not done a hydrolock rod test on this bike. I did this strictly as an opportunity to show everybody who's watching the video how to do it. I didn't know that I had cylinders in this bike that were all filled up with gas, although the bike was brought in and he told me that he'd had a hydrolock event. I didn't know that the cylinders were still filled, and I certainly didn't know that there was more than one cylinder filled. So as you saw, we blew gas out of cylinder number 4 and we blew gas out of cylinder number 2. And if there's anything that you take away from this video, it's the importance of why you wouldn't want to have your coils still hooked up while you're trying to do something like this. Because if that would have ignited, we'd have just melted this bike down into a lump. Alright, so I'm ready to go ahead on with the hydrolock rod test. I've got my little gauge. I'm going to put it in cylinder number 1. And I'm going to show you how to use the starter just so that you can get the piston up in the cylinder bore. Now I've got the piston up now, and I'm just going to touch the starter so you'll see the piston goes down. And I'm going to bring it back up. This is just for showing everybody what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so we're up. Doesn't have to be all the way to the top. I'm just kind of up in the bore. And now I'm going to slide my gauge down until I'm just touching the outside edge of the valve cover. Just touching. There we go. Okay. So there you go. And now I'm going to take this height and I'm going to come over and compare it against cylinder number 4. Okay, now you can see the gauge. That's the height that it was when it came out of cylinder number 1. You can see how the washer is being retained by the little pieces of vacuum hose. And all I'm going to do is just compare that height against the piston in cylinder number 4. So we'll go down through the spark plug hole. Haven't changed anything, haven't moved the engine. And look at that. I'm touching the piston, and my washer is right there at the top of the valve cover, and I don't feel like that this has a bent connecting rod. It looks to be the same height that it was on cylinder number 1. Now I'm going to go ahead to cylinder numbers 2 and 3. Okay, so I've got my gauge in place on cylinder number 3. I'm going to slide the gauge down so that it's even with the top of the valve cover. Right there. And I'm going to bring it over and put that into the cylinder number 2 hole. Drop that right down on top of the piston. And I'm on the piston, and I'm just touching the top of the valve cover with my little washer. So I feel like that 2 and 3 are the same height, and I'm going to say that even though this engine had a hydrolock, it didn't have a bent connecting rod. Well, everybody, that's how to do a hydrolock rod test. This is something you can put together real easily in your garage. You know, there's going to be 1,000 people out there that could look at this video and say I could make something that would be more elaborate or more accurate than that, and absolutely you can. This is something that I'm trying to do for the average guy in his shop. You can use a screwdriver, a little bit of vacuum hose, and a washer, and you can determine with pretty reasonable accuracy what the condition of your connecting rods is. So I hope that you've learned something from this video. And if you have an issue where you're having a hydrolock, deal with it. Take care of it before you do end up with connecting rods, before you do end up with a destroyed engine. And also make sure that you've done something to prevent that from happening in the future. You can go to my website. There's some options there on being able to take care of hydrolock. You can look on the forums. There's some other options. You know, you could put in overflow tubes, or you can put in a shut-off petcock, whatever it is that works for you, but take some step to prevent a hydrolock from destroying your engine. As always, if you own a Concours, you need to be a member of the Concours Owners Group, and I'll look to see everybody online on the forums over there. Thanks again. Bye now.